Veritas Aquitus by Bones Boy 15, Chapter 24, The Breach. Keep on laughing, Privy Sage. You'll fall asleep sometime, and when you do, I'll shave the mane of pride of yours right off. Naruto glared daggers at his giggling godfather after he'd been rescued from the suffocation within the grim carcass, which would have just dissolved into wisp anyway. Naruto was forced to sit in Gert's beast of a truck with no more than a insulating blanket to keep him warm during the cold early hours of the desert's morning. They had to drive into town because Gert was out of clothes that would fit the blonde, and seeing as rejection was so lively, Naruto didn't really have much of a problem when he went into the general store basically naked. It was the damn weather that irritated him mostly. For such a dry climate, the area was so freaking cold at night. Well, admittedly, it wasn't that bad. Naruto was naturally a hot guy. Literally, his body temperature's average was well above the norm, quoted by the then head of the nursing staff as being ideal for surviving the winters of Manto's southmost mountain peaks in thin clothes. Still, that didn't mean he particularly liked being cold. The other thing that really grated on his nerves, aside from being eaten by a giant rare albino grim that was easily a century or two old, aside from losing his clothes, aside losing his first gauntlets, the thing that really grated on Naruto's nerves was when the cashier, a rather cute girl around his age, easily a 7 out of 10, ignored him when he mentioned already having a girlfriend. Then she had the gall to slip her scroll number into the front of his boxers. Seriously, paper cuts, or any cuts really, down there I was a huge no-no, and that wasn't the worst of it. Oh no, that would be far too tame. As if nearly giving little Naruto a cut wasn't enough, the flirty cashier did this act in plain view of his perverted godfather, who immediately started to scribble something into his notepad. So yeah, Naruto was planning on giving the number to Yang just to see what would happen. Once he made it perfectly clear that he did not care for the woman's attention towards him, honestly, ogling his nude form like he was a slab of meat. The nerve of some people. You have to admit, Naruto, she was persistent, Haku said with a small smile. Naruto gave him a dry glare out of the corner of his eye, sent a final glare to his godfather, and then moved his attention to the window of the bulkhead that had arrived very early. Apparently, the pilot had been told by Jiraiya to arrive 8 hours ahead of the scheduled pickup time. This, according to the old pervert, would guarantee them a ride back into Vale. Little did Naruto know that Jiraiya made a rush call for a new pilot to be in the area, calling in a favor because he needed to make Austin aware of the graboid outbreak ASAP. Oh, don't mind him. Kid's just cranky. He didn't get his sleep last night, Jiraiya said once he calmed down. He tilted his head out of the way of a thrown piece of scrap while he scratched another sentence into his notebook. The older huntsman cracked a smirk and glanced at his godson for a brief second. You should be glad I bestowed upon you my woof. Naruto's eyebrow twitched and he looked at Haku. If I ever start to write dirty books, shoot me. I'm pretty sure Yang would support that career, Kurama said thoughtfully. Did Fonny say what? Naruto asked with a hard glare aimed at his red-themed teammate. Shutting up. Touch me. I wanna feel dirty. Kurama, Haku, Sasuke, and Jiraiya turned to the leader of Team Nox as he pulled his scroll out. What? Naruto asked. He shrugged. Yang loved the flick. When did you, Sasuke began? We skipped a lot of classes together. Naruto cut him off and opened the scroll. So, whoa, hang on, speak up. There's a lot of information. What? The White Fang kidnapped my little sister and they have this underground train heading for Vale filled with a lot of dust. How much dust are we talking here? Enough to make sure that the Grim outside the city find a way in? Why do you sound like you're overexerting yourself? Naruto asked, taking note of a few grunts and growls that slipped out of his girlfriend's mouth. Shut up, get your ass back to Vale, and you, I'm trying to have a conversation. Yang yelled at someone hopefully other than him. The call ended with a click, and Naruto looked up at the curious eyes aimed at him. The White Fang are making their move, he said simply. Well, shit. Kurama surmised everyone's thoughts. Jiraiya's features turned hard as he put his notepad away. The self-proclaimed super pervert was in full-on huntsman mode as he lifted a fist and banged on the back of the pilot's seat. Get us back to Vale. Yesterday, he barked. Use the V-drive. Yes, sir. Jiraiya returned his attention to the first tier team. We're going to move very fast in a very short amount of time, so brace yourselves, but don't buckle up. I want you to be ready for immediate response drops. Kurama, Sasuke, you've both trained for it. Haku, I assume it's similar to a worst case scenario escape, Haku said. Yeah, something like that. Kurama said, his voice rising as the engines on the bulkhead suddenly gained an enormous increase in volume to the already loud roar. You ever see any of those movies where the characters jump out of an airship and get right to the battle? Yeah, be sure to duck and roll. It displaces the kinetic force. Don't just land feet first, always roll. Sasuke yelled over the engines. Haku raised the thumb in understanding. Now, what exactly is happening? Jiraiya asked his godson, who then relayed to him what his girlfriend had said. The simple yet intricate plot that the terrorist cell came up with made Jiraiya's features darken. He leaned back and banged on the pilot's seat again. I don't care if it kills us. Get us to Vale in less than an hour, or I'll throw you out of your own goddamn seat and fly us there myself. They made it to Vale in record time, 15 minutes and 55 seconds to be precise. A door on the right side of the bulkhead opened and revealed the wondrous sight of Vale's towering buildings to the freshman and experienced huntsman. Naruto was the first out of his seat, going to the open side of the bulkhead and scouring the area. His eyes landed on a sea of black and white beyond a tower of smoke, and he waved Sasuke over. Get me an IC? Naruto asked over the bulkhead's roaring engines. Sasuke nodded and held his right arm up, with black aura crackling around his hand. The sky darkened over the area over the Sea of Grim, who turned their attention to the thunder rumbling overhead. Sasuke threw his arm down, and a large bolt of lightning fired down on the many creeps and beowulfs. The strike eradicated a good portion of the grim creatures, but still left a considerable amount to deal with. There's your IZ. Do me a favor and don't get yourself killed, Sasuke told his team leader, who looked at him with a grin. Oh, come on, this is me we're talking about, Naruto returned. I'm only saying it so Yang doesn't try to kill me when you tell her about this, Sasuke said before he shoved the blonde forward. The raven-haired teen turned and looked at his two other teammates, as well as his team leader's godfather, before he shrugged. He was wasting time chatting it up and probably would have showboated. Yeah, he'd do that, Kurama agreed. For the best. You're probably right. Haku shook his head begrudgingly. Minato, like you, I've taught him so well, Jiraiya thought as he quickly wiped a tear of pride from his eye and hid the smile that wanted to form on his face. That dick, I was totally going to say something awesome, Naruto growled as he felt towards the creatures of Grim that eagerly awaited his arrival to their level. Rasengan unfolded from their glove form and encased his hands. Naruto's hair resembled flickering flames, and his skin shone brightly. Golden eyes narrowed as he approached the ground. Naruto twisted himself around seconds before he hit the ground, using his fist to create a massive shockwave that knocked the Grim into the air. It also left a rather remarkable sized crater in the previously remarkably untouched pavilion. How's that for leaving a mark on the world? Naruto asked himself with a chuckle. He brought his fist up effectively while the Grim recovered from his ground-shaking entrance and started to swarm him. A mad, bloodthirsty grin spread across his face as he punched the nearest creep across the face, sending it skidding back. Naruto used the aura thrusters on his palms to quickly back away from a group of beowulfs that tried to dogpile on him. He turned on his heel to deliver a firm punch into another creep that attempted to catch him in its mouth. Oh man, I just got these! Naruto grimaced as the Grim saliva cracked his fist. He did punch it in the roof of its mouth, and while that resulted in the creep's head being removed from the body and lower jaw, it had the side effect of leaving some residue on Naruto's hand. The golden huntsman in training shook his hand out in an attempt to rid himself of the sticky substance. Pay attention, idiot, Kurama called as he landed in a bowl a few feet away and pulled the Rikudo in its rifle mode. Naruto ducked as a bullet fired into a beowulf that tried to sneak up on him. Thanks, Kurma. Naruto said with a sheepish grin. He held his hand to his immediate left and fired an aura blast. The Borbotusk that had been in the midst of charging at them squawked and toppled to its side, skidding between the two and resting a couple of feet away. Sasuke landed atop of the boar-like Grim, which squealed in protest. Amaterasu impaled into the young Grim's underbelly, and his feet planted firmly on the masked head and the armorless flank. Sasuke stood up and spun around. The sword in his hand shifted into its bow form and fired 3 preloaded arrows into 3 Beowulfs that were closing in. Flashy. Thought that was our fearless leader's stick, Kurama said, using the butt of Rikudo's rifle mode to bash down another ballsy Beowulf before he unloaded 4 rounds into its chest. Thought I'd mixed it up a bit. On your 6th down, Sasuke told his partner. The fauna ducked as 3 more arrows impaled a creep right in the eye. He collapsed mid-charge and took out two flanking Borbotusks. Where's Haku? Naruto asked as he held off the claws of an Ursa that was trying to take a good chunk out of him. As if to answer his question, a familiar dust crystal-tipped whip wrapped around the Ursa's neck. A sharp pull separated the bear-like Grim's head from his shoulders, relieving Naruto of his problem. Haku's weapon quickly switching into its semi-automatic form before he and his teammates went back in the center of their small square. The team leader used his aura blast to keep the larger Grim at bay while Haku sprayed down the smaller, less armored one, with Sasuke and Kurama using precise shots to bring down some of the numbers. So, what's the plan, Naruto? Haku asked as the 3 shots of his dust crystals took down a few more Beowulfs. He quickly turned and put down another group of Grim. Naruto caught the snout of an older, heavily armored Borbotusk in one hand and pressed his other palm against the side of its head. A quick blast of aura reduced the creature's head to black wisps, and its body dropped to the ground. Naruto's eyes flashed a blinding gold before its semblance flared to life. We'll kill him all, Naruto ordered. He looked over his shoulders at the fox-tailed faunus. Kurama, thin the herd on the wall side. Sasuke, Haku, cover his back and be ready to reload and evac. I thought you'd never ask. Kurama smirked as he shifted Rikudo back into the monk staff form. A firm swat knocked aside a leaping creep before the faunus held the ring tip out towards the Grim on his side. Those that had their backs to the larger barrier wall around the beacon's edge, a little grin spread across his face as the top of the ring separated and opened, a ring becoming a small trident. The smaller rings on the rim magnetically align themselves to perfectly balance around a larger ring. The 3 tips sparked with energy before a small black orb formed at the end. What is that? Haku asked, his attention drawn away from the Grim charging at him for a brief millisecond to admire the growing black orb. It was nearly the size of a grapefruit by this point. That, Haku, is basically every Grim's biggest desire and worst nightmare, wrapped up in one, Sasuke said. He dropped an alpha Beowulf before he looked over at the androgynous teen. Don't stare at it too long. Your retinas will burn. Baked potato going in hot in 3, 2. Hope you like your dinner. Kurama cackled as his thumb pressed down on a lifted section of the staff. The orb shot out and through past the 3 rows of Grim, immediately disintegrating any that came in the slightest of contact with it. Before it stopped about 50 feet in the middle of the crowd, Kurama slumped back, caught by Naruto, who jumped up and pushed off a creep's head. We're gonna fall back to that roof. Naruto pointed at a distant building just on the edge of the square as he pulled Kurama over his shoulders and continued to jump from the head of one Grim to the next. Sasuke and Haku wasted no time and followed his example, the latter disappearing into a mirror and reappearing at a distant building's rooftop. Naruto and Sasuke jumped up off of the tail of a Deathlocker and scaled the building's wall. Haku grabbed Kurama's arms and pulled him up from Naruto's shoulders, allowing the team leader to climb up without issue. Sasuke, turned and took position on the corner of the rooftop, his bow out, and picking off Beowulfs that pursued them. Naruto and Haku helped Kurama rest aside an air vent before the blonde looked out at the black orb still hovering over the horde's wall, and Naruto looked back at Kurama expectantly. Well, give me a damn second, the fauna scrambled out, his breathing a bit labored, and keeping it condensed like from this distance is a bitch and a half. Then stop condensing it. We're not far in. We are. Now blow the damn thing. Fine. One order of mashed potatoes coming up. Kurama lifted his thumb off the exposed button on his staff. The black orb, which was being crowded around by the swarm of Grimm, suddenly expanded to fill the entirety of the square. It encased all the Grimm within the blink of an eye. Even a Nevermore was unable to escape as it blew overhead, its last cry silenced as it was disintegrated when its largest talon grazed the edge of the black orb. Then it rapidly shrank. It exploded on itself and revealed a large spread of desolate, scorched dirt in place of what was once a grim-filled pavilion. No sign of life, human, faunus, or grim remained. Thankfully, it was only those in the final category that fell victim to this large eradication of life. What was a massive window shattered, and a mind-numbing boom drowned Haku's question out. The 14s were knocked from their feet and to the ground, their hands clapping firmly over their ears, and grimaces of pain over each of their faces. I told you we were too close, you brain-dead, hairless simian, Kurama shouted at his team leader. He cringed again. God damn, my head hurts. What? Naruto shouted back. God damn it. What the hell was that? Haku shouted. Ah! What? Sasuke asked, his eyes screwed tight. Shit! This continued for about 5 minutes before the boys' haste cleared, but during those 5 minutes the explosion was heard and the reaction to all reacted to all over Beacon. Ballsy little shits, Jiraiya said as he stood beside Osbin in the headmaster's office, a smirk on his face. As he stared out over at Vale, he sent a glance over at the headmaster. So, where's Jimmy? The general has stepped out, Osbin uneasily answered. Ah, he's gone to assert Atlas' dominance over Vale, Jiraiya nodded. When the council hears of this, they will pull you off the defensive vital and put Mr. Military Might in charge, most likely. Ah, well, when we get the one responsible for this, don't tell Jimmy where he gets locked up. Jiraiya turned and began to head for the doors, which opened as Glinda entered. Jiraiya gave her a longer than necessary glance over before he walked out. Glinda, visibly disgusted with the older man's lust, walked up to stand beside her friend. James estimated the time of arrival is in 45 minutes, she said. I see. Then we have 10 to get the rest of the advanced students on our bulkhead and support Dr. Ublik. Osbin mused. He kept his gaze on the smoking pavilion that had just been encased in a large black dome. His grip on his cane was tight, and his lips pursed, and the people frowned on Atlas for its support of militarized training. The headmaster furrowed his brow. What is going on in this village of Vacuo, I wonder? In the elevator down to the Jiraiya pulled out a red scroll marked with a black activation button, and it popped open. He searched through the various contacts, all marked with various combinations of punctuation symbols. Halfway through the list, he stopped and selected one. A calling icon appeared on the screen, and he lifted the scroll up to his ear. One silly monkey jumped on the bed. A gruff man voice spoke into the phone. Ma kicked down the door and brained him in the head, Jiraiya responded. Haha, nice to hear a friendly voice after such a long time. So what's the skizzy boss, man? What you need this old fool to do for you? You watching the news? Well, no, not really. Just got out of the local jail. Apparently I was spending too much time watching a lovely group of birds. Wish you were here, would have been great inspiration. Find the nearest tavern and watch the news, Jiraiya answered. Vale's been hit. The Queen's plans moved ahead of schedule. Oh ho ho, so it's been busted then? Jimmy's going to want the mastermind's head on a platter, Jiraiya said. The elevator doors dinged open and he walked out. Drop probably snatched him up with his little gizmos and gadgets. Make a big adlusion show of it. Typical meddler. The man scoffed. Gotta show off his toys to compensate for the boys. Now we wanderer boys get the girls off without toys. Jiraiya laughed in agreement. Speaking of boys and girls, your grandson has discovered a little squeeze that was once part of the fangs. Well, is she worth the risk? If I were 30 years younger, I'd beat your grandson black and blue to get some of it. Ah, his mother thought she could keep my influence out by sending him off to Haven, but I knew that he'd succumb to the wills of women, with or without my help. The man cackled. How's he looking? The little son, able to, he's manable, as are his teammates, but it's too soon to tell. I see. The man on the other end let out a sharp exhale. So, this was a call to brag then? No, this is purely professional. That's just a bonus. You sagly old coot. At least I'm able-bodied enough to keep using mine without assistance. Oh, so you and Miss Lefty are getting married? Gonna wear two rings on your finger? Cute. Giraffe smirked. The amusement on his face fell as he resumed his walk. Listen, I'm going to extract the whisk from the wax. We'll play a few hands of poker at the pub after, okay? Yeah, I'll be waiting. Anything else? Yes. Giraffe smirked as he opened the main building of Beacon's doors to the sounds of distant roars and explosions, as well as gunfire and bullhead engines overhead. Tell Ma and Pa that the tadpole's finally lost his tail. Biased old fart. Don't believe me? Challenge him to a spar. He's a bit of a dumbass, but he's ready. Maybe I will. The man snorted. You and Sartobi, you're like, you and Sartobi sure like to boast about Khan's fire, but I wonder if it can stand up to mine. See you tonight. I'll bring the deck. Jiraiya ended the call with a smirk, still plastered on his face. He rolled his neck and slid the scroll shut. His eyes snapped open and golden orbs replaced the normally dark shade. The scroll in his grasp was clutched into dust as his facial markings turned from red to a similar shade of gold as his eyes. Reaching the edge of the school's boundary, the old huntsman crouched down like a frog. I've been in the need for some exercise, Jiraiya muttered before he shot up into the sky, leaving a large crater in his wake. Oh god, what the hell was that? Haku asked again once he and his team lost the haste that had overcome them, completely unaware of the dramatic tension soon to unfold around them. He chanced a glance over the edge and grimaced. Oh, damn it. Wow, Haku swore. Never thought I'd see that day, Sasuke said lowly. He followed Haku's gaze and joined him, grimacing. Shit, look at how many there are. Residue malice must have brought them. Nevermore, Kurama called out. The 4 teens dropped into the back of the roof to avoid being plucked up by the shrieking Grim as it soared overhead. Naruto got to his feet, held his hand out, aimed at the retreating airborne Grim, and took out the creature with a focused beam of aura. Ha! Nailed it! Naruto grinned wildly. He was rewarded with a sharp Charlene horse, courtesy of the staff that belonged to the only faunus on his team, which resulted in the blonde crumpling to the ground with his hands on his knees. God, Dick! That is for not listening to me when I say we weren't far enough, Kurama snarled. He moved to the edge of the building and began to pick off Grim, grumbling under his breath with each shot. Would one of you please answer my question? Haku asked, annoyed that some sort of very powerful anti-Grim weapon of mass destruction had momentarily deafed him. That, Haku, was the beast bomb, Sasuke answered. He took down another Beowulf that had begun to climb up the side of the building they had perched on before he continued. It's powered by all the negative feelings of the one who creates it, and being a discriminated faunus, you could say that Kurama has a good source of negative feelings. Understatement of the century, Kurama said under his breath. He picked off an Ursa with a few centered shots aimed at its left eye. Haku stepped up beside him and fired down at the horde. And the explosion? Haku asked. I'm not familiar on the technical jargon, but I know that it's based off a semblance that my father witnessed in his youth, back during the end of the Faunus Revolution. Kurama explained he was among many who survived a massive Grim attack because of that one semblance, but the one who used it died soon after, their aura drained and killed by a radical racist. Go humanity, way to promote equality. Naruto mock cheered with a fist raised. He fired a beam of aura down at the Deathstalker that was preparing to launch a boulder with its tail. The scorpion-like Grim let out a shrill squeal as its back was roasted by Naruto's aura. Hence why the attack is called a beast bomb, Kurama summarized. I see, Haku said with a nod, because it's a slur thrown at Faunus was beast. By using that term in an attack of such proportions, it would make those who witness it hesitate to use the slur. Exactly, Kurama nodded. He picked up another Ursa and turned when he saw several more bullheads heading for a specific courtyard a block or so away. Hey, Dillian says the main breach is over that way. Fool's bet, Naruto scoffed. He cracked his knuckles and let his semblance flare up to the point his body was almost released in flickers of aura. Wanna sneak over or have some fun? Do you have to ask? Sasuke smirked as he began to spark lightly. Haku and I will cover from the roofs, Kurama said, and Haku nodded in agreement. Awesome. Which side you want, Sasuke? Meat or potatoes? Naruto asked, gesturing to the larger grim on the right, Ursa and creeps of various ages, and a few Deathstalkers first, and then the smaller grim, Beowulfs, smaller creeps, and Barbatusks. I think I've had my share of protein earlier, Sasuke smirked. He gestured to the edge. After you, fearless leader. Why, thank you. Naruto grinned. He jumped off the edge with a backflip into a dive. Banzai! Show off. Sasuke mumbled. He hopped off the edge simply, firing a few arrows in his descent. Kurama shook his head and turned to Haku. Get over to the other building and make me a bridge to climb across with your whip. Are you sure you don't want me to? Hey, my tail allows me better balance than most of your hairless monkeys have, Kurama said with a smirk. Maybe not on Sun's level, but definitely more than Sasuke's, and he can run across it. Fair enough, Haku conceded and backed into a mirror to appear on the building he was told to go to. He glanced down at the sea of grim and looked to his teammates that chose to take the low ground. The two rivals had landed on the edge of the horde, with Naruto's impact making the few nearby grim pause and observed too casually. These grim were obviously not newborns like the last massive group was, as they were covered in white bony armor and left very little room for gaps in their defense. The two teens smirked, with the blonde around stare starting to glow while his semblance amped up and the raven-haired teen sparking in anticipation. First to the finish owes the other lunch, Sasuke asked, while he shifted Amaterasu back into a sword. Sounds fair to me, Naruto agreed with a nod. He looked up at the building's rooftop. Hey Kurama, wanna start a race? Yeah, sure. It's not like we're doing anything that important. Kurama's sarcasm flew into Naruto's ear and was shot out like a rocket from the other. The leader's excitement at the prospect of having a contest that wouldn't result in suspension, making him numb to such traits. Come on, it'll be fun. If I win, Sasuke will have to buy us all lunch. That wasn't part of the bet. Okay, if I lose, I have to buy you guys lunch too. Huh, I get a free meal either way. Huh, what the hell? Kurama said. He took a few carefully aimed shots at the nearest grim to keep them at bay before he cleared his voice. Ready? Naruto grinned and brought his left hand up, the right curled into a fist with his elbow at his side. Set! Sasuke flipped Amaterasu around to hold it in reverse, black arcs of electricity starting to dance along the blade as he bent his knees. Go! The two teens rushed into the horde of grim. Violence and chaos soon followed. Naruto's first steps shattered the sidewalk he pressed off of, which gave him a slight advantage over Sasuke's normal sprint. However, Naruto was stuck with the meat of the horde, a huge disadvantage considering the grim were easily the size of at least a car, or at most, in the case of the single Deathstalker, a bullhead. Not that this bothered Naruto at all that much. He was a huntsman by nature, had the blood of warriors in his veins, and the challenge excited him. It wasn't often he got to use his semblance to boost his strength to 10 times that of a normal human after all. Granted, that was usually because of the consequences in doing so, exhaustion. Once Naruto started to burn his body to the 10th degree or further, he burned through his massive reservoir fast, which left him tired or, in rare instances, unconscious. Aura could only do so much after all, and though Naruto was a natural bouncing ball of energy without his semblance, he had limits like any other person. Naruto pumped aura through his elbows, where the vent was located to give him an increase in speed. His gaze was locked on the main obstacles in his path, the big bad Deathstalker that had thrown a rock earlier. It shrieked at him defiantly and lifted his pincer in preparation to catch the blonde, but when then Naruto cut the aura he sent to the vents and quickly sent a large burst through his palms. The propulsion lifted Naruto off the ground high enough to clear the pincers. Naruto curled his right hand into a tight fist and used another burst through his elbow vent to rapidly spin himself in the air, which caused the descending stinger to be deflected. His This left the Deathstalker's head completely unprotected and allowed Naruto to, while still spinning, drill his fist through its mask. The squeal of pain that escaped the Deathstalker was loud and shattered whatever glass remained after the beast bomb had gone off. Naruto's fist became stuck in the Deathstalker's carcass, causing him to rapidly lose his spin. He fell onto his stomach and groaned. That stun had made him far too dizzy. Worst idea ever, Naruto mumbled as he got back to his feet, a bit lightheaded. It felt like his brain hadn't stopped spinning, and he swayed from side to side with each step he made. Odd the growls, snarls, and roars of the surrounding Grim, and oh, that's right, Grim. Man, I chose the worst time to try new things, Naruto thought as an Urso tackled him into the side of a building. Needless to say, Naruto's head wasn't spinning anymore. Sasuke raced through the Grimm's ranks and cut down the many potatoes he took for himself. They might usually end up with draws whenever they sparred, but in races, Sasuke had Naruto beat, especially when they were obstacles. Naruto was bullheaded and powered through most of his obstacles. He showed finesse and agility when it was necessary, but he failed to grasp the reasoning behind some of them. Sometimes it wasn't how he conquered something, it was how you avoided confronting it. Not the best philosophy, but Sasuke wasn't trying to teach or learn philosophy when he finally understood this lesson. During obstacles racing in Khan Academy, Sasuke wanted to win, to have the best time and score. Sasuke wanted to, no, he needed to be the best so that he could go after that man, Itachi. Ironically, the man he hated more than any other, no on Remnant, was mostly the reason that Sasuke was as good as he was now. Sasuke would tackle a problem like he believed Itachi would, and it was through this method of thought that brought Sasuke to the top of the class, able to analyze and determine the situation in the blink of an eye. Granted, that was suspected of the Uchiha huntsman prior to Itachi's incident by most of the people in Khan. It was hard to try and live up to that kind of expectation, doubly so when Sasuke's father was blessed with a natural huntsman such as Itachi, who graduated from Khan's Academy at the young age of 7, graduated from Jade Academy at age 10, then became a rising star in Bakugo by age 15, and then bore the second average son. In a way, Sasuke's desire to be the best was also a way to throw his father's expectations back in his father's face, but that is a mental evaluation best left for another time. Already at the corner, Uzumaki, Sasuke shouted over his shoulder, "Screw off, duck! Oi, I'm not talking to you!" A loud pained roar was followed by a massive bang, presumably from a wall's collapse. Sasuke shook his head, his small grin still on his face. Naruto was a dumbass, but at least he was a determined dumbass. The amusement and exhilaration Sasuke felt vanished once he went around the bend. He skidded to a stop once as he came across a shocking sight. Words failed to leave his lips, and sounds started to become muted as, for a brief moment, his eyes locked with familiar red eyes belonging to another. The owner of the eyes absently retracted a blade from the chest of an ancient Ursa covered in spines and bony arms and turned towards him. raven locks pulled back into a loose ponytail, falling only to the shoulders, facial features that were more mature and a tad slightly more hardened than Sasuke's own, but still very similar in structure, being one of masculine beauty. The man was tall, easily an inch or so shorter than Professor Osman, who was tall in his own right. He wore a dark trench coat that bore a singular red mushroom-like cloud on the right shoulder, and in the hand that barely popped out from that sleeve was a hooked sword, presumably half of a set. It was easily 3 feet long and gleamed in the daylight. A marking that Sasuke could faintly make out was enough to draw one word from his lips. Susanoo. Sasuke glanced back up at the red eye belonging to the owner of the sword, his grip tightening around Amaterasu. The black sparks danced over his eyes. At this, the man made a sound of interest. I believe father misnamed our weapons. Perhaps you should bear the Susanoo. His voice was slow and smooth, but his gaze, though seemingly disinterested, was intense. Itachi! Sasuke began to tremble. Every bone, every vessel of blood, every ounce of aura were screaming for him to attack. Now he was here, but his mind knew, Sasuke knew, that stopping the Grim was far more important than any confrontation. The man, Itachi, arched a brow and glanced behind Sasuke. There's far too many for me to enthrall. I hadn't expected this many, but perhaps for my situation it's for the best. Itachi mused. He slipped Susanoo into a custom-crafted holster on the left interior of his coat, and then rested his hand at his side. I had not anticipated seeing you, little brother. I'm sure you are barely withholding your rage. That is wise. You are nowhere near strong enough to kill me. I want answers, Sasuke growled. He almost snapped when Itachi poked him in the forehead. Impatience and selfishness were always your greatest weakness, little brother, Itachi said as he lowered his hand to his side. We will have our time to fight, but it is not the time now. The Tin Man comes with his ticker toys, and it's best for both of us if I'm not here when that happens. Itachi took a step forward, stopping once he stood beside his younger brother. Word to the wise, if you value the safety of your friends. Itachi's eyes met with Sasuke's and flashed a dark shade of the briefest of seconds. You will stay out of the Fourth War's way. Before any retort could be made, Itachi then exploded into a swarm of miniature Nevermores, which disoriented Sasuke with shrieks, caws, and loud flaps of wings. The teenager shielded his face with his arm and peeked out through a small crack. His eye narrowed and a scowl crossed his face as he lowered his arm. Sasuke stood before a pavilion of Grim that were slowly turning into black wisps, the fresh kills done with unique cuts only caused by a blade tipped with a hook. Sorry, big brother, Sasuke said, spitting the words out with distaste as he crushed a Boruto's head beneath his sparking foot. But your warnings mean jack to me. Ha! Finally cut up. 2. Naruto trailed off as he came to a stop next to the raven-haired teen. The blonde, now clad in the remains of what was his shirt and torn pants, scratched his head. Damn, Sasuke, if you did all this, why didn't you head over to the next square? Felt like giving you a handicap, Sasuke replied before he ran towards the next corner. What, you freaking dick? I don't need a damn handicap, Naruto snapped, outraged at the thought before he ran after his teammate. They came to a stop in the middle of a courtyard when a loud whoosh demanded their attention. Airships easily capable of being their own islands hovered overhead. Painted on the side was the white symbol of Atlas. Well, if Atlas chose an opportune time to invade Ville, it's now, Sasuke muttered. Maybe it's temporary support against the Grim, Naruto said optimistically. As his semblance dwindled down into nothing, he patted slightly and wiped off sweat from the back of his hand. I mean, I love this job, don't get me wrong, but damn, is it exhausting. At least it's over for now. Yeah, Sasuke said distantly, it's over for now. End of chapter 24.